This talk has officially begun. I'm Tex Dworkin. I'm the co-founder of Rattle. So Rattle is a female-founded company, and we're building tools to make virtual meetings equitable, engaging, and efficient. Congratulations for being here. The fact that you're here today is awesome. It means that that this topic is of interest to you is an important step towards progress, in my opinion. So meetings are both an extension of a company's culture. They're also a huge opportunity to affect change within companies and for people. So they hold great untapped potential. And that's what I want to talk about today. My hope is that you leave today committed to having more equitable, inclusive meetings, because that is the source of that untapped potential. There's a lot I'm going to cover in 45 minutes, so I'm going to jump right in. Jeff's going to be moving my slides for me, which I really appreciate it. But before I get to the slides, I want to share how Rattle started because it's relevant to the conversation today, or the presentation. So we started as a virtual brainstorm platform for underserved or underestimated solopreneurs and teams. And we had human facilitators. As we dug to the core of what was that we were doing, we realized that the magic was in the conversations. And they were engaging, they were equitable, they were a valuable use of everyone's time. And so we decided to figure out, how do we scale that? And so we built an AI facilitator that sends prompts to attendees to drive conversations, and a speaker meter that shows attendee speaking percentages in real time. I was one of those human facilitators. A lot of what I'm going to share today is based on what I learned as the human facilitator, as opposed to not a human facilitator, but you know what I'm saying. Previous to Rattle, my background is socially responsible business and social justice. Okay, I'm going to have you start with the slides, and thank you, Jeff, for doing that. Jeff will be emailing a post talk wrap-up page that will include these slides. So if you want to sort of take less notes, I wanted you to have that sort of peace of mind. Okay, so let's move on to slide number 1.
Here we go. Double back a little bit.
Beautiful. So there we go. All right. So we're here to talk about, So let's talk about, let me just start with a talk overview. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to start with a few definitions. So just make sure we're all on the same page. Talk about how meetings are broken, common culprits. Some you'll probably be able to relate to. We're going to talk about how meetings are fixable and some psychology. I'm going to show you a framework we developed called the Anatomy of a Successful Virtual Meeting. And we're going to talk about psychological safety and equity in meetings, why equity and inclusion are keys to better meetings. We're going to talk about facilitation and end with a call to action. All that in 45 minutes. So next slide. Definitions. So when I say meeting inclusion today, what I'm talking about is a diverse range of people who truly are and feel welcomed and heard. We know when we're not, humans are not stupid. We know when we're not welcomed, and we know when we don't feel heard. When I talk about meeting equity, I'm talking about every person having an equal opportunity to express themselves. And successful meeting, the definition that we came up with at Rattle is that every participant feels that meeting was a good use of their time. It sounds kind of generic, but if you really think about it, for it to be considered a good use of everyone's time, that implies everybody felt heard. Everybody felt they were able to express themselves. It really packs a lot into that. So that's our definition of a successful meeting. Next slide. Meetings are broken. So I think we can all agree there's a lot of room for improvement with meetings. I'm going to get some specifics going here. A study by Asana found that an average office worker spends 2 hours and 33 minutes in meetings a day, like oy vey, with over half of them being deemed unproductive by those in attendance. That's crazy. That's not good. Zoom identified, I bless Zoom for their honesty, that of its 650 million per month meeting participants, 47% are not interacting. Appreciate the honesty, but again, oy vey. And a Doodle study found around 44% of surveyed professionals felt that too much time is spent in meetings. Yeah, duh. 73% of professionals have done other work during a meeting. Guilty. Around 47% of meetings are considered unproductive by attendees. Yep. And only 17% are described as extremely productive. My Lord, think about how much money and time we're wasting. Okay, quick story. I want to sort of paint a picture of what bad meetings look like. Mia worked at a company for many years. Then she transferred departments into marketing. And when she did that, she had a new boss, she had new team members. They had a meeting. And she was super excited about it because she had an idea for this meeting. The meeting was about strategizing a client's upcoming new launch, like product launch. She was very excited that she had this idea. You know, this is going to be like her coming out in this new team. The meeting starts. The boss was sort of the default facilitator, said, all right, let's start throwing ideas out there. She's not going to go first. She just joined the team, right? So he puts this call out. Anyone have any ideas? No one speaks up. Boss is like, well, I'll get the ball rolling. He starts to describe an idea, which takes way too long because he's not the most succinct speaker. Of course, no one else feels comfortable to say, hey, boss, can you wrap it up? Because, you know, they don't feel like it's their place. And then after he finally finishes wrapping up, everybody starts talking about his idea. Well, the purpose of this meeting was to strategize or to come up with lots of different ideas so they could strategize a launch. And right now, they were 17 minutes into this 30-minute meeting. They had one idea. At that point, Mia hasn't said a word this whole meeting. She's like starting to sweat, get like nervous. Like it gets uncomfortable when you're in a meeting and you haven't said a word. No one's acknowledged you. And so what happens next? The boss says, Mia, we haven't heard from you yet. Well, she started off all excited to share this idea. By that point, 17 minutes in, she had gone from excited to uncomfortable, borderline terrified, because she didn't feel comfortable sharing her idea. No one else had shared any other ideas. All they talked about was the boss's idea. You can see where I'm going with this story. The moral of the story here is that she went from excited to uncomfortable in a matter of minutes. That's preventable. What's really sad about this story is it's very common. I'll say one thing about Mia. Not only was she new to the team, English was her second language. And what does that have to do with it? Well, she needs more she needs to be really comfortable to speak and talk in front of a group and share her ideas. And if she wasn't very comfortable, she wasn't going to do it. And she didn't. So what ended up happening? She left that meeting. She didn't, when she was asked, she didn't share her idea. She made a comment about the boss's idea and left it at that to sort of get out of the situation. She ended up leaving that meeting with the idea still in her head. Now, the group failed to achieve its goal. She failed to, share her idea, which she originally was excited about. The question is, like, what if her idea was however many years ago when Nike's campaign came out and said it was the Just Do It campaign? What if that was her idea and it never got out of her head? This happens every day. The amount of value that's left, on the table, so to speak, because people don't feel comfortable sharing. That's one example of why someone might not share in a meeting. There are hundreds of them, which we're going to talk about today. All right. So next slide, please. Okay. So common culprits of meetings, been on hundreds, right? Over talking, under talking, getting off track, anchoring, I'll say a word about anchoring. Anchoring is where the first bit of information that a human brain hears, you latch onto it. And I saw this all the time. And what ends up happening is you go down this rabbit hole because you're basing the whole conversation on this one idea instead of realizing, wait a minute, our goal is to get lots of ideas. And so anchoring is this psychological group dynamic that happens so frequently in meetings. It's very preventable, but it's very common. In terms of what I did a deep dive. I wrote 2 case studies for like commonalities that I noticed in facilitating hundreds of meetings. And I boiled them down to, what is it? 5 categories of the types of culprits. There's behavioral, cultural, emotional, physiological, and social / situational. Just to, a few examples, I mentioned Mia, English is a second language. Someone might be having a bad day, so they're gonna interact differently on a meeting than they would if they were not having a bad day. Somebody might have been really hungry, so they're lower. This is a physiological one. Or the opposite, they may have just pounded a double mocha latte, and then all of a sudden they're like blazing through talking and, 17 minutes go by. Maybe they're shy. Or one that I see a lot that is super interesting is I like to call United States, the people that grew up in the United States, as being raised in an interruption culture, where it's almost like you almost have to interrupt to be heard and talk over people. And like, there's that little nuance of when do you, jump in and when don't you? Well, there's other cultures. For example, our CTO, who is from Indonesia, we had a conversation. He was saying, I was raised never to interrupt. It's a sign of impoliteness. And so in a virtual meeting, he will never talk unless there is a complete silence first. Well, then what happens when you have some people that are culturally raised not to interrupt, and you have other people that are culturally raised to interrupt? There's a disconnect there. The result is some people are going to leave meetings feeling heard while others aren't. These are all real problems, not even problems. These are real instances that can be solved. That's the good news. All right, next slide. Meetings are fixable. That's great news. They were broken before COVID. That's what I've always had my mind blown when early when COVID happened, people were talking about, how are we going to bring meetings online? How are we going to replicate, in-person meetings for, virtually? And I'm like, stop what you're doing. That is the freaking worst idea I've ever heard. Meetings were not great before COVID. Why would we want to replicate that disaster? People were over talking before COVID. Many people left meetings feeling not heard. Bosses had a different, power in meetings than interns. They were unproductive. They didn't make a good use of time. So why on earth would you want to replicate that again? Virtual meetings, this boom, we have what I like to call a golden redo opportunity to get meetings right. Rather than write them off as this time-wasting, morale-busting thing where everyone's rolling their eyes, oh God, I have 3 virtual Zooms, or I have 3 Zooms this week. See them as a golden opportunity that they are. That's what I implore you to do. And learn how to do them right and commit to doing that. Virtual meetings are still in their infancy and they are ripe with opportunity for improvement. So call a collective do-over. It is not too late. The good news is they're fixable. Next slide. Let's talk about meeting equity. Equity is linked to survival dating back to the cave people. Our brains have not changed. Literally, our brains in our skulls right now have not changed that much since the cave time. The limbic portion of our brain is wired, dating all the way back then. It's wired to scan for inequities. If you noticed that you got less food in the cave, It was an important early signal that your chances for survival are dwindling and you need to do something about it. Why am I talking about this now? Why does this matter? Because our brains want to protect this equity. We categorize it as a core need. So scanning for inequities is part of our DNA. If we scan and we sense there are inequities, it puts us in a state of stress. And stress chips away at psychological safety. And we need psychological safety in our meetings if we're expected to openly share. So you can see why equity in meetings is not just this mushy DEI thing. It actually is directly connected to the success or failure of your meeting. If people are in a meeting and they feel that they're not being treated equally, for example, a boss is talking for 20 minutes and you haven't even been acknowledged, you're going to be put in a state of stress. You're going to break down. You're going to shut down. You're not going to engage. I wrote example children. If I don't know if anyone here is parents, I have a 5-year-old, and what kids often do is they want what the other kid has, or early when they're eating, they want what the parent is eating, whatever, because they know they want the same, they want equal, they have this, it's in their DNA. All right, next slide. So meeting equity and inclusion. In meetings, you can tell if they're not needed there or that their opinions don't matter. If you haven't even been acknowledged like Mia, it's going to make her feel something. If you can think about a time when you were in a meeting and no one even greeted you, like when you first got here, Jeff was like, "Oh, hello." That's smart. And it makes you feel good. It makes you feel wanted and like, okay, like somebody acknowledges my existence. There's a feeling that gives you. When that happens, I already said this, like when it doesn't happen, people tend to shut down and disengage. Meetings where people are not engaged, people leave with ideas still in their head, like Mia. Teams fail to achieve their maximum potential, like Mia's new marketing team. Time and money get wasted. Morale decreases, which reduces productivity and retention. And so there's a huge human and financial cost. Check this out. A Workforce Institute survey found that 86% of employees feel people at their workplace are not heard fairly or equally. All right, next slide. Yeah. Okay, so the anatomy of a successful virtual meeting is a framework we develop based on proven facilitation techniques, cognitive science, and experience, facilitating hundreds of these virtual meetings. Each element in this framework helps to create a predictable is a very important word here, stable environment for attendees with psychological guardrails. Ultimately, the goal is to foster psychological safety. More about that in a moment. Let's talk about predictability. Next slide, please. Why predictability matters is, all right, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, they have this basic psychological needs theory. It proposes that humans have 3 psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. The need for autonomy includes the desire for stability and control in one's environment. A study published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Review found that people have a fundamental need of control over their environment, and that predictability is an important aspect of that control. Why am I mentioning that? Next slide. Because all of the things in our anatomy create those guardrails and that sense of control, and ultimately lead to fostering psychological safety. So let me walk you through these really short We're going to stay on the anatomy slide for a moment. So start and end announcements. I mentioned what Jeff did was perfect. He acknowledged each person. I highly recommend doing that. If you've got a meeting of anyone like 10 or less, acknowledge every person by name. Even better, there was a study found that if you can get somebody to say, every person to say one thing within the first 5 minutes of a meeting, the likelihood that they will engage at some point in the meeting dramatically increases. So for example, when we did our what we called rattles, our virtual meetings, we did have an icebreaker. It was short, it was easy, and it was usually fun. The purpose wasn't just to, lighten the mood. It was to get everybody to say something. What was the last thing you ate for, before the meeting? It doesn't have to be a crazy question. We just wanted people to say something. And then with start and end announcements, do you remember when at the beginning of this, I said, this presentation has begun? It's shocking how many seconds, if not minutes, are wasted at the beginning and end of a meeting because somebody's like, there's small talk going on. And somebody's like, do I cut it off? Do I interrupt it? We're at 6 minutes after, and the meeting was supposed to start on the hour. A simple start announcement, this meeting has begun. It may sound kind of dry. If you train your team to expect to hear that, people are actually comforted by it. And what it does is it's like a starting bell. People get trained. Okay, starting bell happened. They know to shut up. You don't have to have the burden be on any one person to interrupt. Same thing at the end. You get that awkward moment of, okay, is the meeting actually over? Can I leave? Or if you just hear this nice, neat, okay, this meeting has officially ended. People are comforted by those guardrails. The next one is agreed upon expectations. This is usually your agenda. Ideal, shared ahead of time with input from everybody in the group. So everybody feels buy-in on the agenda. The next thing is timekeeper. Having the time shown throughout the meeting is ideal. That's what we did in every meeting. So it's not any one person's job to say, we've got 12 minutes left and 3 agenda items left. If you just have the time showing the whole time, bonus. I like to bring it back to the opposite of that, which is like Vegas. You want people gambling? No windows, no clocks. They will lose track of time and they will empty their wallets. The next one is real-time attendee feedback process. So with what we're building, our speaker meter shows the percentage of speaking time throughout the meeting. It's not a judgment. It's just literally saying, okay, Nicolette has talked 23% of the time and Jeffrey has talked 49%. What we discovered is it doesn't make people feel bad. It actually adds a little fun and energy, but it also, people that are over talking, when they see visually, holy macro, I'm at 78%, and it affects their behavior. They start to self-correct. And so that's an example of real-time feedback. Collective accountability. This is a later addition to this framework we created. Collective accountability is all agreeing to what you want in a meeting, so that it's not any one person's job for the meeting to succeed or fail. It shouldn't be. It's a team sport. Then we've got all of this tied together with a culture of inclusivity and curiosity. I've had the question before, how do you build that? I could give a whole other talk on that. For now, what I will say is that it has to start from the top. And you have to lead with intentionality around that. An example of curiosity is not picking other people's ideas apart, but coming from a place of curiosity around it. And then all of that, if you have all of these components, the result is fostering psychological safety. All right, now we're going to go on to that next slide. Let's talk about psychological safety. What is it? It's like having a safe and comfortable place for your thoughts and feelings. I imagine it like a blanket on a cold winter night. It means that you feel like you can share your ideas and your opinions and your feelings without worrying that someone's going to make fun of you, hurt you, or judge you. It's a lot easier said than done, especially if your boss is there. You don't want to say something stupid in front of the person signing your paycheck. And so what you're going for is, if you're fostering this uh, curiosity and this inclusive atmosphere, your hope is that your boss is impressed by your willingness to put ideas out there versus the caliber of the idea. Because often what I've seen is that quote unquote good ideas do not come from one person. They are the cumulative effect of many people bouncing ideas around. And if everyone's afraid of not saying something super smart every time, the innovation goes down, the collaboration goes down. And so if you can get to a place where your boss actually rewards you for putting ideas out there versus the quality of every single utterance, you are making serious progress. Without psychological safety, creativity and innovation are severely stifled. People leave, like Mia, with ideas left unshared. Next slide. Measuring psychological safety. This is super interesting, at least to me. Professor Amy C. Edmondson. It's shocking. Psychological safety is a term that came out in 1999. It's not that old. She coined this term. She outlines 4 dimensions to measure it. What is the degree to which it is permissible to make mistakes? I love that. To what degree can difficult and sensitive topics be discussed openly? How much are people willing to help each other? And to what degree can you be yourself and are welcomed for this? The benefits of psychological safety in the workplace. Gosh, where to begin? It encourages open communication. When employees feel psychologically safe, they're more likely to share their ideas and feedback and concerns. It fosters innovation, encourages experimentation, risk-taking, and learning from failure, which are essential ingredients to innovation. It increases employee engagement. When employees feel psychologically safe, they're more engaged in their work and they're more committed to the success of their team and their organization. It boosts productivity. It helps to reduce stress and anxiety, which can lead to increased productivity and better performance. It definitely supports diversity and inclusion efforts. It creates this welcoming workplace culture that values and respects diverse perspectives and experiences. Diversity of opinions are crucial when you're innovating. And it improves mental health and well-being. A psychologically safe work environment helps to reduce stress and anxiety. Next slide. So how meeting attendees can help foster psychological safety. This is my opinion. It has got to start from the top, but everybody can and should participate in helping it thrive. Authority figures should lead by example rather than with judgment. Focus on building off of versus picking apart each other's ideas. Being kind and respectful to everyone. You know, one of the most crushing things I witnessed as a human, I keep saying a human facilitator, but as a facilitator, it's because we're building an AI bot facilitator. So when I was a facilitator, one of the things, this broke my heart. I'm a sarcastic person by nature. What I witnessed is that sarcasm, while it got a quick laugh from people in meetings, it just was like pouring ice cold water on a collaborative conversation. It's like this sort of passive aggressive negativity. and it would shut shyer people down instantly. And so I hate to say it, but sarcasm is like an example of not being kind and respectful to everyone in virtual meetings if what you're going for is collaboration. I had to stop doing it. It was very hard for me, but I'm working on it. Active listening. You can always tell if somebody's like thinking about what they're going to say next versus listening to you. And so active listening is super important. Starting, you want to talk about how to like actually foster psychological safety in virtual meetings, starting sentences with things like yes and, or what if, or I wonder, versus my least favorite thing ever, you should. Oh, that would just, again, it's like the ice cold water on a collaborative conversation. As soon as you hear you should, it's like a period versus a dot, dot, dot. Fun is a proven facilitation technique that helps to foster psychological safety. So here's a couple of exercises that we used to do. We would have a quick round, speed rounds in general. Like if you just give like 2 minutes on the clock and you're like, let's spit out let's not go for quality. Let's go for quantity. Set the clock to 2 minutes. It's fun. And it gives you not enough time to edit. So silly, weird things come out, but those are the ones that sometimes lead to innovative ideas. And then the other one that we used to do for fun was like, all right, we're at an impasse. No one has any ideas. Let's flip this. What's the worst idea for a client campaign? And just doing that for a minute or two. And all of a sudden, you hear these bad ideas. And then if you turn them upside down, there's some gold nuggets in there. What a meeting facilitator, oh, next slide, please. What a meeting facilitator does. I know the term because I've been living and breathing it for years, but what does a meeting facilitator actually do? They perform key functions that I showed you in the anatomy of a successful meeting framework. Their role is to improve the way teams communicate, engage, and make decisions in real time. Through prompts and other actions, they set and maintain the meeting tone, and they monitor time, engagement, and group dynamics, with the big goal being to draw out ideas from all attendees. Next slide. Common scenarios when there is no facilitator, because facilitators are very expensive. It's very rare that you have a trained facilitator. What's most common is you have somebody assuming some of the job, but they're not fully trained, so they miss key functions. Another common scenario is someone in the group, because no one wants to do it. Often, I'm not saying always, but this is what we've seen. It's a woman who assumes a sort of administrative role and takes it on. But what happens is that takes whoever does that out of the conversation and puts them into the admin role. And that can lead to things like who isn't moving up in their career. If you're just focused on admin tasks versus the meat of what you're doing, like innovating, it could have a very macro impact on who does and doesn't move up in teams. Key tasks that often get skipped when there's no facilitator: encouraging overtalkers to finish up so others have a chance to chime in, calling for voices we haven't heard from yet without singling anyone out, which is never a good idea, bringing off-track conversations back on track, and addressing the anchoring effect I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. What to do if you don't have a trained facilitator on your team, which most people don't. One, obviously, you could do nothing. But how is that working out is the question you have to ask yourself. Another is you could hire a facilitator for every meeting. Most likely not cost effective. They cost a lot of money. Another idea is you could train team members to facilitate and rotate the task. Also expensive, but feasible. Or you could add a tool like Rattle. We have this thing, like a future plan is to have a communication campaign around blaming the bot. No one wants to be the one that's like, hey, boss, can you just stop talking, please? So wouldn't it be neat if you had like a bot that did it for you and no one had to do it? I think so. All right. Next slide. I'm going to give you a quick peek at what Rattle looks like. You'll see it on like the right-hand side of it. Fits into virtual meeting platforms, and the top you'll see there is like a speaker meter that shows the percentage of speaking times throughout the meeting. And the bottom there you see different prompts that are sent to either individuals or to the group, depending on what it is. Next slide, you'll see a bigger version of it. And it's just fascinating to see what happens just when you can all see the talk times. Our theory is that if an overtalker sees how much they're talking, it's not even just, oh my God, look how much I'm talking. It's, oh my God, everyone can see how much I'm talking. That peer pressure has a psychological impact. Next slide. Right. I'm going to share one quick story because I think we have time. This is a quick story. This is my favorite story about virtual communication innovation. There was a team that had a pickle to solve. They needed to decrease their shipping costs. And so they got together to brainstorm, well, how can we reduce our shipping costs? They did. And they decided, well, let's use recycled newspaper. We can talk about the echo effects and all that good stuff. So they did. Their costs went down. Their shipping costs went down. But then they realized that something unexpected happened. Their productivity decreased as well. And when they looked into why that was, they discovered that the shippers were getting distracted reading the newsprint. I guess whoever was writing these newspaper articles was just really good at their job because it was very distracting. So they got together again and like, what are we going to do about this? Let's brainstorm solutions. So one person said, well, we could poke their eyes out and then, they won't be able to read the newspaper anymore. And another person said, that's not that crazy an idea. Bear with me here. What if we partnered with the blind school down the street and did some sort of a work program where we provided free training and gave them jobs, paid them well, and they were our packagers. And so they did that. And what happened is their shipping costs remained low as they needed, and their productivity increased. And so what would have happened if that person didn't feel psychologically safe enough to put that idea out there? What if they had never, talked openly and honestly about what they could do to solve it? What if the boss came from a place of, here's what we're going to try next? They worked together. And one thing I love about that story is it was not the result of one person coming out with idea. It was actually started. The light bulb started with one person saying something that arguably is the worst idea ever. And it's also violent. So it's an example of how ideas can start off one place and end up another when groups come together to collaborate. Let's talk now about how humans achieve big goals, because my big goal here today is to inspire you to make your meetings better. I want people to feel better. I want businesses to feel better about their meetings. There's so many wins if you can fix your meetings. And so it's such a big, lofty goal. So how do humans achieve big goals? I actually Googled this because, I wanted to make sure I had it right. This is big. It was actually ChatGPT. And this is kind of what it came up with. Verbalize the goal, break it down into smaller steps, make it measurable, make it time bound. So based on that, here's some suggested next steps. If you're sold on why making your meetings equitable and inclusive is good for everybody, including the company's bottom line, start by verbalizing your goal of making your meetings more equitable. Get buy-in from leadership if you're not the person in leadership, and get buy-in from the group. I think without both, it's not going to work. because, and I said it earlier, like meetings are a team sport. And I think part of the problem that we're getting wrong is that everybody's like, one person's sweating that the meeting's not going well, and the rest of the people are like, this isn't going well. Well, what if everyone like did a redo and said, let's all get on the same team here. Let's make this a team sport. Let's succeed or fail together. Work together to define your, not just say, like, it starts with a flame, right? It starts with one person verbalizing that you want this, but work together to define what you want and how you're going to get there, and incorporate tools to assist. Of course, I think Rattle would be one of them. We are early, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but working together to define your idea of a successful meeting is a fabulous idea. Then choose metrics together to measure your impact, and choose a reasonable time frame and start experimenting and have fun. I mean, meetings are so bad. There's so much room for improvement that it's kind of fun to think about. Like every little thing you do is going to make them better because they can't get much worse. So start experimenting. Look at every single thing you do as an experiment versus this is the new way meetings are going to be, and to lighten the mood and really just get that sense of you're in it together and you're in explore mode. Last slide. I think this is the last slide, or second to last. Calls to action. There's 3. Number 1, look, this is just what I suggest. Be the one to verbalize the first step to leadership and peers of let's commit to having equitable meetings. Be that person. Be the spark. 2, I'm happy to bring this talk to companies and teams. I did one last week and it was amazing. Why was it amazing? Because there were CMOs there. There was the full gamut of leadership top down, and they were all learning together. And I think that's fabulous in itself. So I will happily bring this talk to teams that are interested in having more equitable, inclusive meetings. And then 3, if you're interested in testing Rattle in your meeting platforms, whichever one you use, email me and let's make it happen. We are in alpha. So our speaker meter works perfectly, and that's an easy one to turn on for you. And you can just see how it's impacting your meetings. And I'd be happy to show you around. Just drop me an email. And that's it. There's my contact info. Jeff?
Awesome.
One?
Yes, this was great. Thank you so much. There's like so much to really unpack when it comes to this topic. And I feel like a lot of it is really related to as community professionals, right? Even as you were talking through the suggested next steps, getting buy-in, working together. Community management is probably one of the most cross-functional titles out there, or roles that's out there. Experimenting, choosing the metrics, like that. So much of that is related to what community managers do day in and day out. And I feel like there's been a trend as well in terms of companies that are looking for community managers to really focus on their internal communities, right? I think one of the things that we talked about as we were getting to know each other is like on the point of meetings, especially in a virtual setting, like this is the front line for culture within your organization. I don't think we have any questions in the Q&A, but one of mine would probably be like, have you seen any impact from Rattle users in terms of this is having short or long-term effects on our company culture overall? Like, you know, we say we're about this, but how are we doing that in our day-to-day practice and interactions with each other?
Awesome question. It's too early.
Yeah.
We're in alpha, so we are just starting to partner with early users.
Yeah.
And our plan is to document exactly what you asked and publish it in a case study. We actually have, we finished our WebEx app, and WebEx is going to be sponsoring a published case study to analyze the effects of these tools in meetings. So I can't wait to find out. I'm hopeful, based on the case studies I've already written up, about the impacts of human facilitation in virtual meetings. So it's to be determined, but I can't wait to find out.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd be really excited to see if there's any impact there, because I can't imagine how there wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Especially with organizations being focused on having community managers work on their internal culture, right? Like, I would venture to say that any organization that has an external facing community, they have to lead by example, right? So how is their internal community, and what does that look like? Awesome stuff. Let me just quickly double check. Doesn't look like we have any questions. I know we have a couple of folks who are still in the meeting. What I'm going to do is just quickly reshare your details for anyone who'd like to reach out and connect with you following this. Again, this is all recorded, so I'm going to make sure that we have that published somewhere to reshare with anyone who wasn't able to attend today, and we'll make sure that we get a wrap-up email out to everyone with all of your information if they're interested in learning more about Rattle. But I really appreciate you being here with us today.
It was my pleasure. I'm going to send you're going to send a link to a wrap-up page which I created. It has some sources I talked about in the talk today, like if you want to watch where the different reports and videos and different sources of stats and things like that, that's in there. And then the actual slides are in there. And then the link to reach out if you want to bring this talk to your team. It's all in one page.
Excellent. Cool. Well, be on the lookout for that information, everyone. Really appreciate those of you who were able to join us today for this. If you'd like to find out about what's going on in the Tampa Bay area, this is actually our first virtual event. We've been doing in-person events in the Tampa Bay area since about September of last year. But feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in learning about when our next virtual one might be. But in the meantime, thanks everyone for joining us. Stay on the right side of positivity, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Love that. Thank you.